Welcome everyone to the All Sports Talk Show. I am your host Isaac Edelman here to talk about a few things on this fine evening. But let's first start off with the NFL and specifically NFL playoff teams that missed the playoffs last year and that will make it this year. I'm here with my co-host Sam Gans, and who do you think is going to make the playoffs this year in a team that hasn't made it last year?
So, when it comes to teams that missed it last year that I think will make it this year, I think we have one extremely obvious one, and then one that a lot of people are saying, but also a lot of people are sleeping on. The obvious one is the Miami Dolphins. They went 10-6, which how they missed the playoffs going 10-6, especially with the new seed added, is a miracle. But it's clear as day that they're going to make it. The team only got better. The main reason they missed it was because they lacked wide receivers. And they went from one of the worst wide receiver corps in the NFL to arguably one of the best. Getting Will Fuller, Devontae Parker will again be healthy next year. And then getting top wide receiver prospect, Jalen Waddle. I think Myles Gaskin will have another year under his belt of progression. The O-line will only get better, especially with adding giant Liam Eichenberg. I think... And then again, with all these weapons who will progress, I think it's clear as day the Dolphins will make it.
I'd have to agree, Sam. And the Dolphins should have made it last year. And based on their record, you'd think they made it. But competition was tough last year. Now, our other co-host, Johnny Goldstein, what team do you think is going to make the playoffs?
Yeah, obviously the Dolphins is the popular pick here, and I do agree with you that they will make it. But I'm looking in New England with the Patriots. I think that they added a few nice pieces in the offseason. I think that Mac Jones will make a big difference. Whether they decide to start Cam or they decide to start Mac, I think that Belichick will be able to bring the best out of both of them, and their defense will improve massively. So I think the Patriots may not be the best team in the playoffs, but they might snag a wild card spot.
And I think with the Patriots, if Cam Newton fails to show something on the field, they have Mac Jones, and they have another option too.
Yeah, what usually happens is you'll see by week 6 or 7 these rookie quarterbacks come in to take over the bad quarterback. But if Cam Newton shows off, reverts to his MVP season, then I don't think that Mac Jones will be able to play at all this year. And hopefully that happens. I think Cam Newton used to be one of the best QBs in the league, and he could really take the Patriots to new heights.
I think another team that missed the playoffs last year and that can make it is the Cardinals. What do you have to say about that, Sam?
I mean, the Cardinals obviously were an amazing team last year, and the main reason they missed it was simply they had a really tough schedule. And they had a whole new roster, basically. It takes a while to get used to it. I think with the addition of A.J. Green, another weapon for Kyler Murray, the O-line, well, not the biggest improvements in the world, is improving. And then, obviously, the acquisition of J.J. Watt and Zaven Collins, two great edge rushers. The defense is going to take another level. Kyler Murray is going to have another year under his belt. And overall, the team's just going to get to, flesh and just work better together. So I think, assuming that Cliff Kingsbury can take the next step as a coach, which he hasn't yet, I think the Cardinals could be a sneaky team to make the playoffs.
And the Cardinals also signed A.J. Green this offseason, and that's definitely going to help. The Cardinals, obviously, they have DeAndre Hopkins, but when Hopkins is getting double teamed, well, there's someone else on the field that you could rely on, and that's A.J. Green, a veteran. Now, let's talk about the teams that made the playoffs last year and that missed it this year. Let's start with Johnny.
So a team that made the playoffs last year and missed it this year, the 49ers, right? They did not make the playoffs last year, if I'm correct. I'm not a big 49ers fan, so I apologize if I'm incorrect about that. But I think the 49ers will make the playoffs this year. I think they're another team that will improve massively, especially with the addition of Trey Lance. They had a ton of injuries last year. They're in a very tough division, but they were in the Super Bowl only 2 years ago, so I don't think that they're going to be as bad as they were last year. And if Trey Lance does end up starting over Jimmy G, they will definitely make the playoffs.
Now, let's go to teams that made the playoffs last year.
So, I think a team that made the playoffs that's going to miss it, we have a couple. I think one that's going to upset a lot of people is the Steelers. Big Ben is only getting worse. That team overall regressed. They lost a lot of good players. Their draft, well, they had a good draft, was a terrible draft. They got a lot of good players, but it really didn't fit needs. Najee Harris, he was a good pick, but he was not their number one need. Pat Freiermuth, he's amazing tight end. Shocked he made it all the way to them. But them taking him is a stupid pick. Eric Ebron, he wasn't amazing, but he was a decent player, decent tight end. He can do his job well. And now you're sitting there with an O-line that is only getting worse because you lost a lot of your starters. Big Ben is only getting worse. They didn't replace the quarterback position. The defense, while it's still pretty good, they didn't fix the cornerback issue. I think in a division where the Browns and Ravens are going to be fighting for a spot, and potentially even the Bengals if Joe Burrow is healthy, I just don't see the Steelers doing anything in contention this year.
I think another team, because I didn't want to skip them, the Raiders. I completely forgot about them. They still have Derek Carr, who really had a good season last year. But in addition to Josh Jacobs, they signed Kenyon Drake.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a terrific running back, too. Again, Kenyon Drake was on the Cardinals last year. So back and forth, look, teams lose and win. Anyway, we have a caller in again. If you want to call in, you could call in at 912-622-9090. Anyway, let's see what our caller has to say.
Hey guys, thanks for letting me on the show.
No
Welcome.
problem. Welcome.
You know, when I think of teams that made the playoffs last year that will not make the playoffs this year, the first two teams that come to mind for me is the Washington football team and the Chicago Bears.
I'm going to say that I think the Washington football team they're gonna win the division this year.
Easily.
All the other teams in their division got worse. The only addition that the Eagles made was Devontae Smith. The Giants did get a few good receivers, but they're still the same Giants as they were last year, and the Cowboys are always overhyped. So I do think the Washington football team will make the playoffs once again this year. Taylor Heineke looked great last year. They got Fitz, so I think that they're a really gritty team, and they're going to look to be back in there.
Yep, and I agree with you on the Bears. That was actually a team I had on my list. They're going into a full rebuild. They won't make the playoffs. I agree with you there. But the football team, it all depends on how well the Giants can mesh as a team.
But do you really think that Ryan Fitzpatrick could lead a team better than Dak Prescott, a top 10 quarterback?
Well, I don't know why, I don't know how we could compare Dak Prescott to Ryan Fitzpatrick. But again, it's the receiving corps. It's the defense. And obviously the Washington football team has a much better defense than the Cowboys. Obviously, Dak Prescott's way better than Fitzmagic. But when you have Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, spreading the field, and then in addition to Chase Young on defense and others, it's a real good team effort. The Cowboys have a good offense, but Ezekiel Elliott keeps on regressing, and they do have CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper, but outside of that, the Cowboys are not a complete team like the Washington football team are.
And in addition to that, I think you also have to predict that Fitzpatrick probably will not be their guy by week 5 or 6. Taylor Heineke looked great in that playoff game against Brady last year. I do think after a few games behind Fitzpatrick and getting a few lessons on throwing, Heineke will be their guy.
For sure.
All right, well, I'm glad that we could agree on the Bears pick. I think that with Andy Dalton, I don't really care if Justin Fields starts. I don't think that team goes anywhere.
Okay, thank you so much for calling in. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for letting me on, guys.
Anyway, before we end the show, we do want to touch on one thing. Tonight, at 7 p.m., we got the NBA Draft Lottery. Very
sure.
special thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, look, Sam, what do you think of this Draft Lottery tonight?
Before we run out of time, I quickly want to jump on it. I mean, I think we're going to see a lot of jumps. Personally, I think I have the Pistons at 1, Magic 2, OKC at 3. But one of my biggest jumps that I have is I have the Spurs jumping from 12 to 9. It's not a huge jump, but I think Jonathan Kuminga is going to fall to them at 9, and he's going to be the perfect DeMar DeRozan replacement. Odds are DeMar DeRozan will not return. He's getting older. He wants to contend, and the Spurs are going into rebuild.
Yeah, and it's always hard to predict the NFL draft lottery, or the NBA draft lottery, my mistake.
For
With
sure.
all these statistics and the ping pong balls, you don't really know what's going to happen. But I will say, if the Timberwolves do get the number 1 pick, they're going to look scary with Kate Cunningham.
The thing that's interesting, though, is if they take Cade Cunningham, what happens to D'Angelo Russell? Like, do you move Russell to the 2 and have Anthony Edwards play an undersized 3? Do you trade Russell again? Do you try to trade that pick to get maybe a forward? Like, it's interesting what happens with the Magic, for sure. Or the Timberwolves.
Interesting opinion. Anyway, that's going to do it for the All Sports Talk Show. I'm Isaac Ederman with my co-host Sam Gans and Johnny Goldstein. Look, busy day in sports ahead of us as always, and enjoy your night.